You're listening to Your Calm Parenting Path. I'm your host Nina, a mindful parenting coach and mum, here to help you go from overwhelmed and reactive to calm, confident and connected with your kids. This show is for parents who want to raise their children with more patience, less stress and a whole lot more joy. Because small shifts make a big impact and you can build the parenting life you've always wanted. If you want to see what I'm up to, follow me on Instagram at Mindful Parenting Lifestyle, and don't forget to hit follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to Your Calm Parenting Path. Today I'm joined by Nicola McAlister, a trainer and consultant from Fife in Scotland, our first international guest with over 30 years' experience in education and foster care. Nicola now supports parents and professionals through her business, The Regulated Child UK, helping them understand children's behaviour through the lens of self-regulation. She's passionate about helping adults move from reacting to responding so we can better support the children in our care. And as a mum of 2 children herself, including a neurodivergent child, she really gets the everyday challenges that families face. I'm so excited to share this conversation with you. Let's dive in. Welcome, Nicola.
Thank you very much, Nina, and thank you for having me along all the way from the other side of the world.
I love this. This is what podcasts can do for people, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Now, can you begin just by telling us a little bit about yourself and what led you to focus on child development, behaviour and self-regulation?
Okay, well, I actually began life as a primary school teacher, and I moved really quite quickly from mainstream teaching into working within a setting for children who were experiencing social, emotional and behavioural needs. And really, our traditional styles of behaviour management was not effective for those children for a number of reasons. But one of the main reasons, are when all we do is focus on consequences, which traditional behaviour systems are. It's all about rewards and consequences. All we're doing is focusing on the behaviour. And, we're missing a big part of the jigsaw, which is behaviour is actually the signal. It's the cue that a child's inner system is in complete chaos. It's functioning under real high levels of stress. So what we ended up just doing was firefighting again and again and again. So we were looking at different ways of supporting our children in schools. And it was a great time when there was a lot of research and work being done around child development and brain development and how our early experiences impact on how we react and how we respond. So with that in mind, we were really looking through the developmental lens, and when you think about it, we're really focused, as parents on child development, we're focused on, how do we support our child to, when they're really little to walk and to talk and, to feed themselves. And when they get older, how do we help them in school, to learn to read and to write? The big thing that we don't focus on that is super important is how do we support self-regulation within our child, which is a real crucial area of child development. And if we can support our child to develop self-regulation, which is supporting them to set goals, and we're talking about daily goals, so it's goals such as, getting out of bed, putting your clothes on, having a shower, packing your school bag, supporting them to stay focused on what they need to do, to navigate the curveballs that come their way, to deal with the stressors, because that's what self-regulation is. It's how our body copes with stress. And our children, they experience stress everywhere and their little brains are still under construction. So we need to use our fully constructed brains to support their kind of little brains that are still under construction, to support them to regulate their little bodies and brains when the going gets really tough. So that's the kind of journey that I've been on, is moving from that quite kind of consequence-based style of looking at behaviour, understanding that behaviour is communication, behaviour is about unmet needs. And actually, we're in a really powerful position as parents to come along and support our children and to meet those needs in different ways and to do that really proactively so we can actually minimize some of those behaviors while supporting our developing child.
Oh, Nicola, that's so, so good. I loved what you said about how you were fire extinguishing all these little issues that came up. And that's like the situation where you're helping the kids at the bottom of the cliff that have fallen down. But what we need to do is get them to the point where they're not falling down. And I really like that analogy with the fire extinguisher. And so talking about seeing that behaviour through a different lens to be able to come from what is that need that needs to be met, that's kind of causing the behaviour and prompting the behaviour. So when parents have had this shift and you've seen it through your coaching, how does that affect how they parent and their way that they're viewing their children?
It's a game changer. It's hard. Let's not beat around the bush, Nina. Behaviour is really tricky. When you've got a child who is overwhelmed and they're maybe kicking or screaming or biting or slamming doors or shouting at you, it's really difficult not to react and not to respond to that because, behaviour's contagious. Emotions are contagious.
Mm.
But what a real game changer is just stopping and thinking, right, okay, how do I feel right now? And if you are feeling overwhelmed or angry or upset or completely confused, then the chances are that your child is feeling the exact same, but tenfold to that. So it's looking through the lens of rather than challenging behavior or unwanted behaviors, it's really kind of understanding. If we just even shift the language, Nina, to rather than challenging behavior, what about distressed behavior?
Mm.
And I think as soon as we see or we think about our child as being distressed rather than being challenging, all of a sudden
Yeah.
something shifts within us.
Mm.
Because why would we not help our child if they were distressed?
Yeah.
Why would we not do whatever we could to soothe them, to get them back to a place of feeling calm and safe and connected? But if we look at it through the lens of they're being challenging, they're being manipulative, they're being controlling, being volatile, and we put all those labels,
Mm.
then we react and we respond differently. So I think sometimes just by shifting that language of let's look through the lens of distressed behavior. And as soon as we look through the lens of distress, automatically we shift how we react and we respond, and we actually kind of come to our child and we can, and in our heads, we're thinking, okay, how can I help? How can I support you?
That is so powerful. Even as you talk, I can already feel the shift from that language, the difficult child, challenging child, distressed child. Your approach is going to be completely different just by changing that one word. That's so powerful. So, what are some common behaviours that are actually cues that our child is feeling overwhelmed or stressed that we might be able to interpret perhaps differently or more proactively before they become distressed?
It can be all sorts of things. And I think something just to kind of remind ourselves of is that we make a lot of assumptions about our child's
We
behaviour.
do.
So, and I do it myself. That this is my profession, has been for many, many years. And I still, for example, my daughter is moving into the teenage years, and she's a real worrier, and she thinks 10 steps ahead, and I will make assumptions. For example, when she started high school last year, she was really nervous about going to high school and she wasn't sleeping at nights. And I made the assumption that, well, it's obviously because she's really anxious about going to the big new school and making friends. And actually, when I stopped and we spoke about it and we unpicked it, what she was really anxious about was getting on the school bus and being late for school.
Interesting.
So majority of time, we think we know where a behaviour's coming from, and therefore that's what we respond to. Actually, what we are trying to do is we're trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist. So if we actually stop and we have the conversation, once the dust is settled, because we were responding to behaviours, there are two camps. There's being reactive, which is when you are in the eye of the storm. And the kind of behaviours you might see at that point is you might have a child that is screaming or is shouting, or the complete side of that, a child who is completely shut down, who has slammed the door, who is shut you out. And at those points, what we tend to do is we respond immediately to the behaviour, and that's kind of being reactive. And we do need to be reactive, but what we do need to do at that point is we need to stop just for a few seconds before we react and we respond, because generally our gut reaction, when somebody screams at you, our gut reaction is to scream back. So what we need to do is we need to stop, take a pause and think before we respond. That little bit's firefighting.
Yes.
And once we dampen the fire and we settle things down, that is when we do the really important work. And what we tend to think as parents is that when the going is good, we kind of sit back and we think, yes, everything's fine, everything's calm, let's just leave it. But actually, that is when the really important work needs to be done, because that's when we can be proactive. And when we're proactive, that's when we can get in and we can actually minimize the likelihood of those behaviours happening again.
Exactly.
Because what we can do is we can kind of have a conversation with our child. We can reflect in a non-shaming way about something that was hard. And when we're reflecting, we have to be really, really careful that we don't reflect on the behaviour. That is a golden rule.
Yes.
We don't talk about the kicking, the screaming, the biting. As soon as that is your conversation opener, you will shut the conversation down.
100%.
We need to go in there with empathy. And none of this is actually quite counterintuitive. It's really tricky as parents because it's not how we were parented. And the only experience that we have as being parents is how we were parented ourselves. But we have to go in with the validating how our child felt. So I could see this morning when I asked you to put on your shoes, that was really hard for you.
Yeah.
Not to say this morning when I asked you to put on your shoes, you threw them across the room. That's not on.
Yeah.
We're going to get nowhere with that. So it's looking beyond the behaviour. What we are doing is we are lifting the lid on behaviour. We're lifting the lid and we're looking underneath. And we are trying to figure out, and we're trying to play detective with our child, not making assumptions ourselves, but with our child about the stuff that is hard or tricky, or the things that you didn't like, but you just had to do because there's no choice. And it's when we take that approach to those difficult behaviours, we can move from being reactive to proactive and working with our child, which also strengthens the relationship as well.
It does. And I like how you're saying, you dampen the fire, and this kind of approach can be used before and after. So if you see that your child had a tough time this morning putting on their shoes, then you have the conversation after that. But if you know that they're going to a party on the weekend and they're not going to want to leave, you can have the conversation beforehand based on past experiences. So you can talk about how they're going to manage that in advance as well. And so meeting that need in that situation where they just want to keep playing, they don't want to leave, they're having too much fun, and addressing that as well beforehand and giving them an idea of what the process is going to be so that when it happens, they're expecting it and it's not quite so end of the world devastating for them. That kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and but the majority of behaviour comes from unpredictability. Unpredictability is one of the biggest stressors, and it's the biggest stressor for us as adults. But you think about our children and whether they are little tiny tots or whether they are teenagers, it doesn't matter. As I said, their brains are still under construction, and the part of their brain that is still developing is the bit of the brain that helps them to reflect on what happened before and use those experiences to plan how they are going to navigate something the next time, or the part of the brain that helps them to predict what's going to happen. So let's think about the going to the party. I'm going to go to a party and I am going to be having so much fun. And at some point that's going to come to an end. And what we're talking about there is transitions. Transitions are endings and beginnings, and endings and beginnings are all about predicting how you're going to feel, predicting how you're going to manage it, predicting what you're going to do, predicting what's going to happen next. It's actually really, really complicated for our children who are not good at any of that stuff. We are, as adults, we are the masters of that. So what we need to do is if we can predict that something is going to be tricky, rather than sitting there with our fingers crossed and hoping that it'll be okay, which,
Yeah, done that one before.
we do. And let's face it, life gets busy and we do. But what we need to do is we need to be one step ahead. And that's what all regulation is. We are using our brains, we are using our fully constructed brains, and we are using our regulated systems to get in there before, and we are coaching. And that's what kind of parenting is. And actually, we're doing a phenomenal job there, because through coaching and modelling and that predicting and taking them through the scenario before it happens and not telling them what they're going to do, actually open up the conversation saying, that might be really tricky for you when it comes to the end. I'm wondering, what we could do to make it easier. What do you think might help?
I love that.
And that is all of a sudden, that is open up. The brain is firing. The child is practicing predicting skills, or practicing planning skills. They're practicing all the stuff that is part of self-regulation. And that's how they develop those skills. They don't develop it by us sitting down and telling them what they've to do. They develop by practice in real life scenarios.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Now, you have created a self-regulation model that you teach your coaching clients. I'd love it if you could step us through the core elements of your model based on, what we've been talking about and anything that we might have missed so far.
Yeah, and it's exactly what we've been talking about. But what I do is I put a framework around it, and it's a 5-step framework, and it is super, super simple. And we can use this as parents through every single routine that we are trying to embed with our child. Or, we talked about the things that are kind of also the things that are coming up that might be tricky. So there are 5 points to this, and it's goal, predict, plan, do, review. And I'll take you through each component of it. And as I say, it is super simple.
And lovely listener, I will put these in the show notes. So you don't need to take notes right now while you're listening. Just absorb the information, and you can go to the show notes if you wanted to write them down later.
So the goal is about being very explicit, because again, as adults, we tend to generalize. So we talk about, for example, the nighttime routine or the morning routine. And actually, there's a whole heap of different components within that routine. So for example, the nighttime routine, we're talking about the getting the teeth brushed, the getting the shower, the having supper, the getting the pajamas on, the getting into bed. So what we need to do when we're talking about goals, we're not talking about big goals. We're talking about breaking down day-to-day routines into tiny little components and making them very explicit. So it might be about getting your pajamas on. It might be about going into the bathroom to brush your teeth. It might be about sitting down at the table to eat your supper. So it might be about switching the television off at the end of the day. So it's about breaking them down. And I talk about when we're setting those goals or thinking about those goals, we're thinking about the 4 W's. We're thinking about the what is it that I would like my child to do or my child needs to do? Where does it happen? When does it happen? And who is around? So when I am talking to my child about the goal, I would be making it very explicitly so they can almost visualize exactly what the situation is. So that is the setting the goal. And what I'll do is I'll talk through the framework, the 5 components, and then I'll come back and I'll talk through some helpful scripts about, what we
Great.
can say to kind of work us through the framework. So that's setting the goal.
Now, can I just quickly ask, if you want to work on your whole bedtime routine and you've broken it down in, say, like 6 different components, would you focus on one component for like a week or two, kind of get that one nailed, move on to the next one, rather than doing them all at the same time, just different goals?
That is a brilliant question. Yes, I would absolutely be focusing on one thing at a time.
Great.
Just as a little aside, when I'm working with coaching parents, what I get them to do is I get them to write a list of what I call unsolved problems. And I'll say, be as explicit as possible. And we can have a list of 20 or 30 things. And then we focus on one thing at a time. And I always kind of, you liken it to, we're spinning all of those plates. And what we need to do, if we keep trying to spin them all, we'll drop them and they'll crash to the floor. So what we need to do is take some of those plates, put them back on the shelf,
Nice.
just for now. We're going to pick them back up again, but we're just putting them on the shelf for now. It doesn't mean to say that we're letting all the other stuff go. We're just shelving it for now and focusing on one thing at a time until we're pretty sure that our child can do it and they can do it without our support. And then we go on to the next thing.
Thank you.
So yes, one thing at a time. So the next thing, once we've kind of decided this is the one thing that we are going to focus on, and another aside of that would be start with the small stuff.
Yep.
If your child has an absolute meltdown at the end of the day when it's time to switch the television off, that's not your starting point. Okay, because what we need to do as parents, we need to become comfortable with using the framework and the scripts, and our children need to become familiar with us parenting in this way. So we start with the stuff that we think we've got a good chance of success at, because we want to get success for us as well, so that we feel, yay, we've done it, we've nailed it, as well as our children.
Exactly.
We want to get those little wins. It's about getting the little wins. So the first thing is about the goal. The second thing is about the predict. And we mentioned that a little bit earlier. Our children live very much in the present and the here and the now. As adults, as parents, we get completely stressed because we are not mindful and living in the present.
Exactly.
We are constantly reflecting on all the things that we should have done or should have said, and constantly thinking about all the things that we need to do and predicting.
Yep.
We need to support our child to do that, because as I said, that skill, that capability is underdeveloped within our children. They don't learn or have the full capabilities of self-regulation until they're into their mid-20s. So really, they really are apprentices. They are novices at this. So we need to help them to predict. We need to help them to predict the stuff that might be hard or tricky or stressful or scary, or the things that they don't like, but there's no choice. And we would be using that language, I think this might be tricky, or it might be hard, or do you know what? I know that you don't like doing this, but there's just no choice. But we are predicting that before that stress response button has been hit and our child's in the throes of stress. So that's the predict. The next part is plan. And this is another important part of self-regulation, the ability to plan, to say, right, okay, I need to do this. I know it's going to be hard. So what are all the things I need to do in order to reach that goal? So it's about breaking it down. And again, one of the big mistakes that we make, and I do as well as parents, is we are fixers and we do it for our child. So we say, I know it can be really tricky when you're getting your clothes on to get ready for school in the morning. So this is what we're going to do. And we make the plan. But do you know what? If all we do is make the plan, we never give our child the opportunity to practice doing the planning a bit. And planning is so important to be able to regulate your stress responses. So it's about saying to them, okay, what might help? What could we do? What do you think you need? How will I know you need help? What are we going to do first? And then what are we going to do? So it's very collaborative. It's about engaging them in the process. And you know what? If you've had a say in the plan, you are more likely to carry out the plan.
Yes.
Being told to do it, it gives so many opportunities for opposition or for others just to switch off.
You got a finger in the game, don't you?
Absolutely. You are invested. It was your plan in the first place. You're going to want it to work.
100%.
So that's the third part. The next part is the do part. And again, this is a bit, we're great at talking with our children. We're great at kind of making those plans, and then we set them off. But what we've got to remember is that our child, because, their little brains are still kind of developing, is that they get really easily distracted or they get really easily overwhelmed by things and they forget what it was they were going to do in the first place. So we need to, this is where we co-regulate, we need to support them through the doing.
Yep.
So we need to be there just to kind of, just to check in, just to help keep them on track, just to kind of say, what's your plan again? What was it you said that you were going to do? Or what's your job? So it's about kind of just keeping them on track. Or if we are not there to support through the plan, it's thinking, okay, what physical supports do they need? Do they need a little visual reminder? If our child's a little bit older, for example, my daughter, she's got a mobile phone. So it might be I'll send her a little message or she'll
Yeah.
take a little screenshot of something and carry it with her. My son, and as you see, he's autistic, he's much younger. So it might be that he'll have a little picture in his pocket or he'll take something with him, a little kind of object that will remind him.
Mm.
Or I'll speak to, maybe if it's something at school or something, I'll speak to the person who's supporting. This is the plan that we made today. So, could you help support him through that when I'm not there?
Great.
So that is the doing bit, because the children really need help with the doing to ensure that they achieve the goal. And then the final part is the review. And again, this is the bit that we tend, especially if it's gone well, we kind of think,
Yep.
all right, let's move on to the next thing. But we need to help our child join the dots.
Yep.
So it's going back and saying, okay, well, what worked? No, that went really well. I'm wondering what worked for you today, or that didn't go so well. I'm wondering, maybe next time we need a different plan.
Mm.
So it's almost like a cycle. It's not linear. It doesn't go on a scale. It's on a cycle, and you can hop on that goal, predict, plan, do, review at any point. But if you are using that throughout your day-to-day routines, if you're thinking about things that are coming up or something that's just happened that hasn't gone so well, and you begin to use that and become familiar with it, then it is an absolute game changer. And not only are you minimizing what would be tricky or concerning behaviours, but you are also strengthening a core capability of self-regulation that is going to serve your child throughout childhood and beyond. And I spoke about kind of thinking about script, and how we can language, because self-regulation is actually self-taught.
Yes.
It's the little voice in our head that we all have. If we're having to deal with something that's really tricky, we'll be saying, okay, right, what is it that I need to do? For example, if I'm heading off to work in the morning and I get stuck in a traffic jam, the next day I'll be saying, right, okay, tomorrow, what am I going to do? Because I've been late for work today.
Yeah.
Okay, am I going to get up earlier, or am I going to take a different route? And that's us self-regulating. We are doing it every minute of every day, but we're only aware that we're doing it when something hard happens. So we need to kind of think about the predictable language that we use with our child. So when we're setting those goals, it's about being really solution focused and validating those feelings. It's about going in and saying, after school today, I noticed that when you were getting in the car with your little brother, you were finding it really tricky to sit on your side of the car seat. Wondering, what's up? Rather than when you got into school, you wouldn't, you got in and you wouldn't stop poking and prodding your brother and winding him up.
It's as if you were in the car with me this morning, Nicola.
It's a common one, I guess. I live and I breathe that on a day-to-day basis, Nina. I know where you're coming from. But, so it's about, and now where we've set the goal, we've done the 4 W's. So we've said what, where, when, and who. We're doing it in a what's up. We're presenting ourselves as the helper, as the coach. What's up? And we will have made assumptions about why our children weren't getting on in the back of the car.
Yeah.
We're having a fight in the back of the car.
Exactly.
Actually, maybe it's something completely different that it's something that happened before our child got in the car. Or they might say, well, I just had a really big fight with my friend just as we were leaving school and I was really upset. Okay. So it's not about it's about the fight they had. Right, okay. And then we're then into now that must have been really hard for you because it's really tough what we have a fight. So we're doing the predict bit. Okay. And like we're there onto the plan. I'm wondering when you go back into school tomorrow, how are you going to manage that? What would help? How are you going to make friends again?
Mm.
And then, so you're all of a sudden, you're not focusing on the fight in the car. The issue's actually been the fight with the friends. So it's about, we could have focused on the fixing the fight in the car. Actually, it wasn't about the fight in the car. So it's about the language that we use. It's about validating. Oh, that was really hard for you. That was really tricky. Now, even if we think that something isn't tricky, it wasn't a big deal. If it was a big deal to our child, we need to acknowledge that and say, okay,
Exactly.
because it's all too easy. You know, when my daughter's saying to me, oh, I'm really worried about going into school today because I've got a test in English. And for me to say, but you don't have to be worried. You're really good at English.
Who cares about tests? Yeah.
Exactly. You know, we have just completely deflected a big worry. So it's about saying, oh, I can see how that would be really hard. You know, I can see that you're really worried. So all of a sudden we're back in the predict. Okay, how can I help? How can we make this a little bit easier for you? How can we reduce some of this stress? What can we do? What's going to make it easier? So all of a sudden we're into that planning again. We're validating those feelings. We're predicting and we're helping to plan and we're supporting through the process as opposed to putting up the wall and saying, that's nothing to worry about. That's not a big deal, which is what we do a lot as parents. If you think about us as adults, if we were to turn around to our partner and say, I'm really worried about going into work today, and they were to turn and say, you've got nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
Yes, and quite rightly so, but we do it with our children all the time.
We do it with our kids.
So it's about using that language as helpful, as short as well. It's about minimizing the language. And if it's helpful, Nina, I can provide for your show notes some scripted language that would go with the film, so that can go into the show notes as well.
Oh, that would be amazing. Yeah, we'll definitely put them in the show notes. Thank you. Treat for everyone. Now, we're coming to the end of our chat today, Nicola, and I ask every guest that I have if they could offer one small shift that a parent can try this week that will have a big impact. What would it be?
I would say we've talked today all about our children, but the most important thing is us. And a child or our child is only as well regulated as we are at any given time. So my little takeaway would be that before we begin to focus on our child and how regulated they are at any given time when we're dealing with a situation, I want us to stop and look at ourselves and just say, right, okay, how well regulated are we? Because if our inner system is in chaos and turmoil and we are overwhelmed, we actually don't physically have the capability to support our child's regulation. So we always need to look at ourselves first. So before we dive in, all guns blazing, we need to stop and see, right, how am I presenting? Because when our child is dysregulated and overwhelmed, they are picking up on all of our cues. They've got their detectors out. So our tone of voice, our body language, our facial expression. So we need to be very intentional in how we go into the situation. Okay, how am I sounding? How is my voice tone? How are my gestures? What words am I going to say? So we almost need to rehearse it before we go into the situation so that we don't make things worse.
Oh, you're speaking to my heart. Nicola, we are so on the same page. I love it.
Oh, fantastic. It's been an absolute pleasure, Nina, an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. So where can listeners find out about your work?
My website is regulatedchild.co.uk, and you'll get all the information on there, whether you're looking for parent coaching or online courses. And also you'll find me on social media, on Facebook and LinkedIn at Regulated Child.
It's been so nice talking to you today, Nicola. Thank you so much for joining us. And listeners, I hope you take some lessons from today and enjoy your calm parenting path.
Thanks, Nina. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Your Calm Parenting Path. I am so glad you're here. And I hope this episode gave you something useful to take into your parenting journey. If you'd like to dive deeper, Sign up to my mailing list at mindfulparentinglifestyle.com.au for more tips and insights, or book a free chat to learn how we can work together. And don't forget to hit follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. I look forward to speaking with you next time on Your Calm Parenting Path.